Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I am delighted to be here. I just say that I met Pak Sofian and Pak Willie in the early years of starting up. And to see it come to this stage with this impressive ideas, looking at how Indonesia's Economic Summit can really open up this new era with a new president, a new cabinet, but also to face a global dynamic which is so much changing. So I'm really humbled to be here, your neighbor from Singapore, to try to understand how Indonesians are looking at the world and their own prospects. And I'm doubly delighted to see so many friends here. And my triple happiness is because the panel we're going to have resembles some of the best brains I've ever seen in our region, looking at this important issue of trade. Not just trade in itself, but trade in terms of the dynamics of rules and the opportunities for growth. Growth, not just in the macro number, the top numbers, but really down into the details of jobs, good jobs for our people. With those introductory remarks, let me please call them up to stage. I'm actually not sure which order I should use, so let me just start with among the panelists, the person I've known the longest, Ibu Mari Pangestu. Ibu Mari, will you please join us? In Jakarta, she needs no introduction. In Washington, D.C., she needs no introduction. In Singapore, we also know her a little bit. So it's wonderful to see you, Marie. May I also call up the next, just in order of the seating here, another Indonesian trade specialist, and one I've come to learn a lot from, Dr. Lily Yang, please. Lily, will you come up stage? To just speed it up, if I may, call up our next speaker. Fukunara-san is no stranger to Indonesia, as you can see from his batik. He also has spent many years here working for IRIA, the Economic Research Institute of ASEAN and East Asia. He is back in Japan and as the president of JETRO's IDE. Come, Fukunara-san. But he constantly comes to Indonesia because of the great promise here. And last but not least, Deborah Elms from the USA and based in Singapore with her own trade center. Ladies, and you notice there are three of them, and only two of us in the minority. We should start, but let me just say one more word about the context. I'm very impressed that the new cabinet, the new government of Indonesia, and the President Prabowo has come in with a very clear mandate of what it wants to do in terms of trade and downstreaming. And this has been quite consistently iterated with many different ministers. But in that time between the inauguration of President Prabowo to where we're sitting today, the global context has changed a lot. Where we were negotiating with a Biden administration, we're suddenly talking or listening to what Trump is talking about. So I think that, to me, is the starting point. Does Indonesia's initial ideas how to win in global trade start to change because global trade itself is changing from a rule-based system into, as the title tells us, a kind of war? Now, I've known Mari Pangestu the longest. I respect her too much to throw in the deep end with this tough question. I think I start with you, Dr. Lily. Lily, would you like to start? How do you think? No, I know you too well, and I like you too much to throw you in the deep end. So let me throw Lily into the deep end. We come back to you. Yes, let's go to Lily and make her ask the tough question. How Indonesia could bear up to this new Trump administration and the new rulelessness that is emerging?
Thank you for giving me such tough question. Thank you so much for having me. Before I address your questions, let me share with you two simple observations. The first one is that last year, ASEAN was the fourth largest economy in the world. The US with 29 trillion US dollar, China 18 trillion US dollar, Germany 4.7 US dollar, ASEAN was recorded at 4.1 trillion US dollar. The second simple observation is that slowly but surely, ASEAN has cemented itself as the major trading partners for major economies. So it's not only they are important for us, but ASEAN has become very important for major economies in the world. We were the first largest trading partner for China, second for Japan, third for South Korea, and fourth for the US. Now, how the Trump administrations will gonna affect the Indonesian's economy, or how the US-Sino tensions will affect the Indonesian's economy and ASEAN's in general, I think it's gonna bring two challenges and two opportunities. First, in terms of challenges, is on tariff and investments reductions to developing countries, because Trump provides a lot of subsidies for domestic investments. The second is on the challenge, on the opportunities, is one, ASEAN can be import alternative sources, replacing or substituting Chinese products. The second one is FDI relocations from China to Southeast Asian countries. Now, how can Indonesia and ASEAN tap into these opportunities? I think the key is on domestic reforms. And in particular to Indonesia, I would like to highlight the importance of the roles of FDI to developments in Indonesia. Because just to give everybody simple examples, compared to other ASEAN countries, Indonesia is the lowest, has the lowest ratio of FDI to GDP. So there's really a big homework for Indonesia, how we can tap into FDI relocations from China if we don't do domestic reforms properly. So I think I'm gonna leave it there, then we're gonna continue discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. That was very short and a very good introductory. We'll come back around several times to the panelists. I think she set a good template to try to really have a few key points first. I think those are very important, interesting points of how domestic reform is the key to drive Indonesia's. Now, I'm going to go to Marie last, which will irritate my old friend. But because some people whisper to me that they never want to speak after Marie, it's very hard to look impressive if you go after Marie. So I'm going to go down this way first and come back to Marie. Umar-san, would you like to share your view? Japan is a long-term investor in ASEAN, and particularly Indonesia. How are you seeing this?
Yeah, it's a bit unfortunate that the Japanese foreign direct investment inflow is really slowing down in the past few years. But I think ASEAN as a whole, FDI coming from China and also from the US was accelerated in the past few years, and it's a good sign. Second Trump administration started. We really have to check news every day, and it's a sort of painful thing to do. But we can pick up some good aspects of that changes, sort of new opportunities to utilize that. One is, so I call the positive trade diversion effects. So the tariff differentials between China and the third countries imposed by US would stay. So that means that third countries, including Indonesia, can export more to the US. So some part is done by Chinese firms, but some part is local firms and other firm nationalities. So I think utilize the positive trade diversion effects. This is definitely a very important thing. And you see that in case of Vietnam, particularly, they are really attracting a lot of additional foreign direct investment. So I think that's one thing. Another is right now a little bit coming in a slow manner, but high-tech export control strengthening by the US. I think this is much more subtle. The area covered is much narrower, but very effective and generating a lot of uncertainties. So there's a chance to attract high-tech industries here too. So if you look at Vietnam and Malaysia, now there's a big boom of hosting a new investment in semiconductors, and also Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand, so having a lot of data center investment and other things. So many US firms and other firms in the Western side particularly tries to reformulate their supply chains from China-centric to the third world. I think that the ASEAN has a lot of chance to attract those kind of things now. So I think we have to take advantage of those kind of changes. And Indonesia is not really fully utilized that kind of opportunities yet. So going back to domestic reform, so basically we really need a good investment climate and also reliability and credibility of the whole system. I think those are extremely important. This is a good chance to change that and to attract much more investment here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimura-san. Deborah?
Yeah, I don't think we quite grasp yet just how much the global economy has changed in a remarkably short amount of time. And that's important to remember because what worked a month ago is not what is likely to work going forward. Now, I don't want to overstate necessarily the importance of Donald Trump to the rest of the universe, but he is taking a wrecking ball to the global trading system that is unprecedented, at a speed that is unprecedented, that will have consequences for all of us, even people who don't seem to pay attention to these things. And so, first message is like, this is serious. This is really serious. So let me just give you, and every day it changes. So, a couple things that happened this morning. Every day in Asia, you pick up your phone and you go, oh God, how bad is it going to be today? Okay, so today, what did we get in the trade space? Well, Trump yesterday announced that he wants 25% more tariffs against autos, pharmaceutical products, and semiconductors. It's unclear whether this new threat of tariffs is on top of last week's announcement about what he calls reciprocal tariffs. I put this in quotes because let me just describe this reciprocal tariff idea quickly, because again, it will affect anyone who wants to export out of Indonesia to the US and potentially further. The reciprocal tariff idea is not just, I charge you whatever you charge me, reciprocal, right, matching. So if you charge 10% on microphones, I charge 10% on microphones. That maybe sounds sensible, but number one, it's stupid. Because the fact that you charge 10% on microphones doesn't mean it's suitable for me. The fact that you are screwing your customers by making them pay extra 10% on inbound microphones is your problem, but it shouldn't mean that I screw my own consumers with 10% on microphones. So first, it's nonsensical. Second, it's logistically challenging. Into the United States, there are roughly 12,500 different tariff lines. Every single thing has a tariff, right? So chairs with leather, chairs with pleather, chairs that are wooden, chairs that are steel. Every single one of them has a different tariff line. If you say we're going to take 12,500 tariff lines times 165 other WTO members, that's over 2 million tariffs that would have to be administered. Complexity, okay, so maybe we come up with some AI solution and we fix that. But the reciprocal tariffs idea is worse. We take your reciprocal tariffs and we add a sort of an X factor. We bundle together a lot of things the US doesn't like and we call it a general unfairness category. Could be your tax system, could be subsidies, could be just what literally the last sentence of this rule says, whatever USTR finds unfair. And we add that to the reciprocal tariffs. And so all of a sudden, we are in uncharted territory. Charge whatever you want on whenever you want, on whomever you want. Good luck to you. Now that's bad if you're trying to trade with the US, which is noted was the 4th largest trading partner for Indonesia. But it also creates another problem, which I'll just mention briefly if I haven't freaked you out enough, which is this is completely gutting the world trading system. Because it says that number one, I can discriminate against anyone at any time, whenever I feel like it. And number two, we're no longer following the second bedrock principle in the World Trade Organization. We are all built on doing trade with the WTO. We've been doing it for all of our lifetimes, really. Gone. And not only is it gone, but just to give you another piece of trade information from this morning, the World Trade Organization members don't seem to be able to figure out how to solve this problem. So we've had important 2 days of meetings in Geneva to discuss what are we going to do in response to this crisis. And the members are completely paralyzed around what the solution should be. And so literally yesterday in Geneva, one of the things they were trying to do was say, well, can we, as smaller groups, so not 100% of us, but smaller groups, can we do stuff? And the answer at the moment is no. So this is not just issues with the United States, but it is increasingly affecting trade with all of us in ways that will have implications for Indonesia and elsewhere.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Maria, I hope I've stepped up the stage well for you. Questions about Indonesia's domestic reform, but a vastly shifting international trade order. You are a WTO expert, but you're also an expert in Indonesia. Your turn, please.
Okay, let me first of all respond to what was just all said. Yes, we are living in a very uncertain world with whatever the US is or is not going to do. And I think Indonesia has to have a two-track strategy. Yes, we have to figure out how to navigate our relationship with the US and whatever is going to come. But at the same time, we should not get distracted totally with what's going on in the US. So in terms of how to respond to the US, I think we have experience from 2018. Now it's probably going to be worse. But we are going to, even though our trade deficit is small, we will still be, asked to do something, whatever it is. And Deborah added that it's not just tariffs they're going to look also at our non-tariff barriers. And if you learn from 2018, they will look at whatever US companies are going to be complaining about Indonesia, which is going to be in the deal, right? And everybody knows one company that in particular, and we were having a joke yesterday, having a discussion about what the issues US will raise. We actually have two issues with the same name, Apple. American Apple's coming in to Indonesia because of all kinds of quarantine and non-tariff barriers, and the other Apple, which is the iPhone, right? So we can anticipate actually which issues will come up. And there's also in 2018, we also had the GSP extension as well as that in the package. So I think we figure out how to engage with the US and make the right kind of deal, including promising to buy more from the US. And not sure we will follow India in saying, yes, we are a member of BRICS, but we don't believe in de-dollarization. Things like that, right? You kind of package yourself if you like to engage. But let's not get distracted with what matters, which is continuing the trade between ourselves, between each other. So we need to not retaliate and follow the kind of path of let's make Indonesia great again. Let's protect ourselves and take an inward nationalistic look. That's not what we should be doing. We should be continuing to open up with each other, increase the regional economic integration, deepen the regional cooperation, and work on our domestic reforms to take advantage of what will happen, which will be a reshaping of the global value chain, becoming maybe more regional, having regional hubs, and it will be very dynamic. But we need to be there to be part of it. And this is to the point of what does Indonesia need to do? Yes, domestic reforms. And how do we diversify our export base? This is not a new question. Indonesia is blessed and cursed by having a lot of resources. We've gone through many cycles where the resource booms tend to make us very complacent and not diversify our export base. So I think we need to really take a good look at our competitive advantage, which is still resources, and now we have downstreaming on top of that. Yes, we want to have value added. But we want to be looking at is the value chain. In the value chain that starts with nickel all the way down to the electric vehicle, which part of that value chain are we competitive in, and where we should be maybe now and in the future, and then build the capabilities or the infrastructure around it. And be practical and pragmatic. Not everything can be downstream in the same way as nickel. There will be other dimensions of increasing value added. Let's call it increasing value added rather than downstreaming. And let's not forget our existing sectors, which is the labor-intensive sectors. I believe we still have comparative advantage there, but we do have to do the domestic reforms. There are many discussions right now. How can we increase our competitiveness, again, in the labor-intensive sector? And I would say there's a potential new sectors, which are the green sectors. And the fact that we have resources, we actually have the potential. This is always, we always have this big debate. We always have a lot of talk about our potential, which, how do we realize that potential? We have the potential for renewable energy from many of our resources. And companies are going to be looking to be locate where near the renewable energy. You know, aside from Trump leaving Paris, companies and competitiveness is going to be driven by sustainability. I think, Fuku, you mentioned the need for data centers, which will need a lot of energy. Yeah? So we have that advantage. We can attract industries that can co-locate near the renewable energy. Perhaps Professor Hausman may have made this point yesterday, because this was a point he raised in our discussions. And you can have green industrial estates, green special economic zones. And what we should be doing now is not targeting investment, targeting the whole supply chain. But you got to start somewhere. You can't have all of it locate in your country immediately. You have to figure out and study the supply chain and where you want to be. And I guess my final point is there is this challenges, but there are the opportunities, the relocation, diversification opportunities, and the search for clean energy as a location is, I think, something Indonesia could have a role in, and developing the different value chains, whether it's resource-based or non-resource-based, and let's not forget the services sector. That's my usual call, because I've been fighting this services, the importance of trade in services battle for a long time.
On the green part, it's not just because Marie Pangestu is wearing a beautiful green jacket, but it is a global demand that data centers and a lot of production be as carbon neutral as possible. I face that if you want to get into new high-tech centers, it's critical to have that green grid. Now, I think, Lily, I'll go to you next, because you really were very disciplined at the start. Just give a few key points and then left it. Would you like to come back about any of the points that Marie or others have raised, especially about domestic reform, and further your points?
Thank you, Professor Tay. Let me also highlight one thing. When I discussed ASEAN was recorded as the 4th largest economy last year in 2023, 2024, ASEAN also, along the way, contributed 8% to global trade, 5% to global manufacturing value added, and ASEAN was the host of 17% of global foreign direct investments. And why I highlight on FDI, particularly in Indonesia, China, during its peak of developments in 1990s, in 2000s, China had the ratio of FDI to GDP more than 4.3%. Indonesia now, in 2023, we had 22 billion US dollar. We recorded 1.6 ratio of FDI to GDP. Last year, it declined to 1.4% because we only had 19 billion US dollar, okay? Singapore recorded 34%. Even Vietnam recorded 4.3%, Malaysia around 2%. So this is something that Indonesia needs to highlight, how we can simplify foreign direct investments and all investments procedures. And I want to highlight with Bu Mari in terms of potential sectors. I think for Indonesia, we have 5 main potential sectors. One is shipping industry, second, railway industry, third, semiconductor and digital. Singapore has contributed 11% of fabrications to global fabrications industry. Malaysia contributed 5% to assembly, testing, and packaging in semiconductor. Vietnam is catching up. So it's really important for Indonesia how we can tap into semiconductor and digital industry. The fourth one is fisheries and seafood products. The last one, I totally agree with Ibu Mari, renewable energy. Indonesia has potential in renewable energy, and it goes along with semiconductor, digital, and other supporting sectors for the other sectors that I mentioned in the beginning. So I think now I totally highlight the importance of domestic reforms because I don't want Indonesia to be dragged down into this kind of protectionist measures because it doesn't work, it never worked. Even during the first Trump administrations, Trumps really want to reduce trade deficits. But if we see US trade deficits in 2017, the US recorded trade deficit of 297 billion US dollar. When Trump left the office 2021, the US recorded trade deficit of 395 billion US dollar. Does Trump policy of protectionist policy work? It did not. It even just shooting the US companies. It's what happens right now. The US companies starts to file the complaints because at the end of the day, the higher tariff will gonna increase US domestic. And for all US representatives here, I just would like to highlight that Indonesia's exports to the US, ASEAN's export to the US, we are not your competitors. What we export actually to support your domestic productions and your domestic exports. Thank you.
Imran, can I go back to you? In your earlier comments, you talked about how Japanese FDI flows have been changing. Can I ask you to further that thought? How does Tokyo and Japanese companies see Indonesia and ASEAN particularly? And especially this talk of downstreaming, is it well understood in Tokyo?
Yeah, I think in a sort of a policy discussion in Tokyo, it's really dominated by national security argument, so maybe too much. So just looking at the US and China and how we can survive, and naturally we have reasons why we are doing that, of course, but looking at ASEAN and particularly in Indonesia, so really active economic activities are going on. So they really have to look at Asia, and it's a sort of a psychological balancer for Japanese people, I think. And also the strength of the Japanese companies here, still we have a comparative advantage in a sense in machinery industries, including automobile industry. And we are not really very strong in digital things and new type of services. So that's why I think that the presence of the Japanese firms here in stock is still pretty big, but in flow, not really increasing. So a sort of not quite visible in a sort of Japanese firms' activities. But thinking of a sort of downstream strategy, starting from really high upstream, certainly you have a lot of opportunities for developing that kind of industry. That's fine, but downstreaming from natural resources down to the industrial agglomeration in downstream, there's a lot of distance here. And also downstream strategy, in the past, Germany had a relatively similar strategy, but the upstream was a chemical industry rather than natural resources. So chemical industry generates a lot of innovation over there. but not natural resources. So I think Indonesia should go back to maybe a sort of old story, but having an efficient industrial agglomeration in downstream, but not necessarily a sort of a countryside. So regional development is of course important, but in Jakarta metropolitan area or around Surabaya to form the efficient industrial agglomeration. I think that kind of investment is still very important. The country is small, then maybe depending on just one industry, that is enough. But Indonesia is a huge country, so you still have to generate a lot of employment. So I think still you need manufacturing. So the downstream industries are very, very important. So still that kind of, maybe some people say old story, but that should not be given up yet. So that's what is needed. Then probably the Japanese firms can be a little bit more visible in economic activities in this country.
Thank you, Kimura-san. So much has been said about America, and Marie advised that, and Kimura-san in a way too, was saying how looking at Trump, looking at America is critical, but don't forget trading with others. I think first Marie should go become an advisor to Tokyo, so that would be good. But if I could ask Deborah, how would you frame the case for ASEAN and Indonesia? If you were in Trump's White House, what would you say to him about our region? Into the trade.
Okay, well, that's a tough one. I would be tempted to say, nothing to see here, sir. Focus on something else, so that he doesn't pay attention to ASEAN. That would be ideal from ASEAN's perspective. You know, I think crucial to Indonesia's success and to the success of ASEAN, I think, is to say, okay, the world is very different than it was. It's going to get a lot harder to find those opportunities. Those trade lanes that we're used to are going to be disrupted. We need to be thinking creatively. We need to be faster with our own decision-making than we were in the past. I think those are important things. Domestic clearly is important. But also, this is all chaos provides an opportunity. This is an opportunity, I think, for more regional integration. So we've been on this ASEAN agenda forever. And despite all of this effort in ASEAN, inter-ASEAN trade is stuck, in fact, declining. So, I mean, I don't have the statistics nobody has statistics at the top of their head like Lily does, but trade continues to decline within ASEAN. That is a mistake. That's a missed opportunity. So how is it that we can actually finally implement much of what ASEAN has promised forever and speed up the inter-ASEAN trade in goods and services, support that use of investment, but also do so with the wider region. So we have, which is great news in ASEAN, it's why I'm still here in Asia after 20 years, because this is a place that still has optimism and integration and cooperation built into its DNA. I think that's fantastic. So how can you better integrate with the region? Good news, Indonesia and ASEAN have a lot of trade lanes that are available to them. ASEAN, of course, all of the ASEAN +1 agreements, also RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership that brings together all of ASEAN with China, Japan, Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, 15 countries. Let's really make that happen. Let's not have it as an agreement in a drawer. Let's actually implement it, accelerate it even, and start that sort of, Asian integration for the purpose of Asia. Like, why is it that we are all so structurally set up to deliver final goods and services to the US and Europe? Okay. I realize they're valuable, but let's think about Asia for Asia and see if this is the moment when you can actually make that happen.
When an American talks about Asia for Asia, I think it's a good thing. But of course, Deborah has been in our region for such a long time. If I could turn to our two Indonesians, whichever order you want, but perhaps Marie first. Many of the things you've said have comforted me. I'm from Singapore, a small country to your south, and one of the largest investors. We hope to see an Indonesia that's very committed to global rules, to trade within ASEAN, but a non-protectionist one, the domestic reform, all the things the two of you have said. But I want to ask you whether your voices, you think, are the prevailing viewpoints here in Indonesia. Or put it simply, if I was to take a pen and put ensuring that Indonesia and ASEAN will be on the winning side in the global trade wars, I put and ASEAN there. The two of you might agree. Would other Indonesians? Murray.
Well, I'm not quite sure what you're exactly asking, but I will try to answer it. I want to also make, before I answer your question or figure out what Indonesia and should be doing to win the war, I wanted to make 3 points on ASEAN, just because you and I are long-time ASEAnists, and I think we still believe in ASEAN.
Please, we do.
So 3 things on ASEAN, and I was in the U.S. in January, right after, actually during the day of the inauguration and a week after. So we talked to a lot of people, and we also talked to a lot of people in the region and thinkers and so on. 3 things come out as to what we should be doing as ASEAN. We have to strengthen ASEAN, just as Deborah was saying. We need to this is actually the time to strengthen ASEAN and RCEP, strengthen the trade and regional economic integration between us, but not just between us, but also to engage with Europe, with Middle East, with everywhere else, including, we have an Indonesia-EU SIPA, which is in negotiations, and that will be important component. Second, everybody is expecting that there will be excess capacity coming out of China, whether because of slowdown or because their goods cannot go to the US. So the increased flood of Chinese imports is affecting everybody, right? So here is where ASEAN actually could take a position vis-a-vis China on this. We would call for the use of trade remedies, proper use of trade remedies, rather than tariffs or retaliation, and have a good dialogue with China in terms of the kind of investments that are going to be relocating here that will reduce that flood of imports, produce here rather than import. Third, deal with the US. Don't be hubs and spokes, which is what happened in 2018. Can we, without, of course, getting too much attention to yourself, have an ASEAN position to deal with the US? And this actually came as an advice to us from a number of the think tanks that we visited when we were in the US. So on the Indonesia question, I think your question is, are we in that mindset to do the domestic reforms and so on and so forth? I would say that we are going to make that argument. Maybe, there's always this saying, I've done research and work and been part of reforms for the last 3 decades in Indonesia. And a crisis is often the time when we make the good policies. So let's treat this as a crisis. We have a crisis of sorts in terms of having to absorb the labor force. Maybe not a crisis, but if you really want to grow at 8%, this is what you need to do, kind of argument. Increase investments, and you can't increase investments unless you improve the investment climate, and address all the issues that are there. When I started working on reforms in the mid-'80s, there was this term that we used, high-cost economy. It was actually somewhat euphemism for corruption. Yeah. But unfortunately, the word high-cost economy has re-emerged now in the business sector. Not just issues of corruption, but the cost of doing business is up. And I'm part of APindo, Kadin, and IBC. These are all business representatives here. And I'm also at the National Economic Council. And we are day-to-day hearing all the issues faced by the business sector. And if you summarize it, it does lead to the domestic reform agenda about the trade issues, the import licensing, the SOS, I was going to say SOS, I meant OSS. OSS, which is the one-stop service. The Business Ready World Bank survey recently was launched here. And they had this number which stuck in my head. In Indonesia, it takes 65 days to start a business compared to 3 days, which is the best practice. And at that meeting, the BK Minister of Investment said, we are going to reform that. We have a target of 10 days. So that's something concrete that we have to work on. Other than that, I think logistics, infrastructure, still an issue. So shipping and railway, yes, opportunity, but logistics, making it efficient, is still going to be an issue. And if you want to have industrial policy, let's focus on innovation. Let's focus on developing the skills and capabilities that are needed for us to be in any part of those value chains, whether it's semiconductor, renewable energy, and so forth. And I would say, back to my point about renewable energy and co-locating near renewable energy, there's a big discussion now on green industrial estates and special economic zones. There you can also have some kind of industrial policy where you can attract anchor tenant and supply chain. You have to have a targeted policy to do that and understand where you want to be. We are getting a flood of investors coming in, but I think we need to be more strategic in the kind of investments that we want to attract. And to address, we will always have this protection of the domestic industry, protection of the SMEs argument that tends to be, having been trade minister for 7 years, the easiest policy to use is trade, right, Deborah? That's the easy one. Okay, let's protect. I'm protecting you, right? But that's not the way to do it because it's going to actually hurt you in the way you're going to develop, not create jobs, et cetera, What we should be doing, improve our trade remedy instrument. This is the trade defense instrument, anti-dumping import surge. Deal with the illegal imports. That's one of the big issues also faced by our business sector. And really have good targeted policies to empower your SMEs. You know, not just on paper, but really look at how we can empower our SMEs to really be either part of the value chain or be competitive in their own right. And there are many ideas around this, whether it's e-commerce or whether it's, I know some of the business sector have ideas about being off-taker to the SMEs. You know, these kind of ideas, make it real, make it work, make it an actionable program. And that should be the way that you address the downside risks of increased competition.
Thank you. I think that was a very good answer to the rather long question you gave. We've got about 7.5 minutes left. I suggest that I ask Lydia a specific question about 5 sectors she mentioned. Do you think Indonesia is attracting enough interest in those sectors you mentioned? Fisheries, railways, I think, is underdeveloped in this country. Then some last comment from you, and then we'll go down to Kimura-san, Deborah, and have last comments from them, and give the last word back to Marie. Is that okay? So Lily, a bit about those 5 sectors, then the last word.
Sure. Let me pick up from the last point that Ibu Mari mentions. When there is a crisis, there's actually an opportunity. If we see FDI to Indonesia in 2029, there was the time during the global financial crisis, we only had $5 billion in 2009, but then 2009, but then it increased to $13 billion, almost 3 times in 2010. So this is actually the opportunities for Indonesia at the time during the global financial crisis. But if we see for the last 5-6 years, FDI in Indonesia was only around 21 to 22 billion US dollars. So that's why I really emphasize the importance of FDI. And it's really important for Indonesia governments for not doing business as usual. There are potential investors out there. If we are just doing business as usual, if we just keep silent, if we just treat our domestic and potential investors just the way we are, we're just gonna lose with our trading partners. And I also highlight the importance of why Indonesia should work together with ASEAN. I always tell, every time I give a talk everywhere, I always tell ASEAN, not only Indonesia, because the market of ASEAN is huge. We are 690 million populations with the potential of GDP, trade, and investments. I don't mean to undermine Indonesia, but sitting together as a group, and I totally agree, it might be good to have Indonesia and ASEAN in this theme, because sitting together as a group, we will be much more acknowledged by our trading and investment partners, and it's really important for us to improve our regional trade and investments. And let me highlight by the importance of investments, be in the manufacturing or services. The key is that Indonesia really need to highlight or the importance of domestic market and have this kind of consistent long-term plan. We cannot have IKN in one day and we cannot have free food and the next day, and we have another program. So it's not about that. Investments, you're gonna invest for 20, 30 years from now. So Indonesia and other ASEAN countries, we need to have a clear and consistent long-term development plan. That's how investors will come. Otherwise, they're just gonna see as, they're not gonna be interested in 1 or 2 years appetizers. They invest in the long term and they see the potential in the long terms. Thank you.
A last word from Kimura-san and Deborah, and then Marie. Go ahead, Kimura-san.
Yeah, we haven't talked about the rule-based trading regime, so very quickly, I think, yeah, the various kinds of trade policy by the US and also China are really weakening the rule-based trading regime. Now tariff may come to the third countries too, so then we may have a retaliation and everything, so we will have a lot of chaotic situation in the trading regime possibly. So I think Indonesia is already one of the very influential leaders, not only in the global south, but in the world. We really have to protect, retain the rule-based trading regime as far as possible, even if we cannot really change the policies by the US and China. So Indonesia should be connected to all countries in the world. I think the rule is extremely important. So certainly, Indonesia may have some policies to change eventually in order to be consistent with for example, the WTO rules and others. So trade policy world is virtually many countries are doing a small cheating. That's why we have dispute settlement mechanism, actually. So you don't have to set everything immediately, but eventually you have to be a really respected, developed country. So we really have to protect the rule-based trading regime. So together with trade-oriented middle powers, we really have to protect that one. So the role of Indonesia is very important, I think.
Thank you. I'll tell the special envoy for you. Please, Deborah.
I think that would be great. So anytime that Indonesia can speak up on behalf of the WTO and rules, that'd be great, and not block things, fantastic. But what I wanted to do from my closing bit was just to reinforce the message about smaller businesses. Like every other economy, Indonesia is actually largely driven by small and medium enterprises and micro businesses as well. And so anything that you can do to provide more opportunities for those micro businesses to grow or to become small businesses is important, because that MSME sector cannot be overlooked. That's really where jobs come from. It's where economic growth starts. It's where you deal with different groups in society, rural populations, women, disadvantaged groups, et cetera. They tend to be in the MSME sector. So thinking about not just how do we trade in general, but how do we unleash the growth potential of the smallest companies, I think is super important. And again, in a time of crisis, where new ideas are potentially on the table that weren't there before, doing so with one eye on how do I better empower my smallest companies, I think is really important.
Thank you, Deborah. The last word is Marie's, but only 1 minute. The clock, it's not me.
Yes, this is the narrative that I hope everyone will go away with. I think maybe we're not in a crisis, but we will miss the boat if we don't get our act together, and we will miss the opportunities that are out there. And we will always be talking about the potential and never realizing our potential. And for that, we do need to double up on investments and exports. To get scale and to be competitive, you need to look at exports, not just the domestic market. Don't keep on saying we have a large domestic market. It's not big enough for the scale for you to be competitive. And investment and exports are important to get the infusion of technologies that are actually rapidly changing in front of your eyes. So unless you are part of the investment export value chain, then you are not going to be able to develop. And we need to grab those opportunities. The domestic reforms is a costless stimulus. No need to have any budget there. Just do it, sit on it, and make sure that all the issues that businesses have actually come to tell us other issues are addressed. There are short-term issues, there are medium-term issues. Let's have a concrete agenda which can be evaluated and monitored regularly together with the business sector on this, including, I will conclude with Deborah's point also that we do care about the empowering of the smaller and medium-sized enterprises within that.
Thank you. The trade rules debate is something very technical and no one can understand it. Talking about Trump is endless and exciting, but sometimes no one knows what's going to happen tomorrow. Between these two poles of technical and Trump, I think you'll join me in thanking our panel for reinforcing some of the critical things that Indonesia, ASEAN, and our region can do that is neither technical nor Trump-based, but very essential and helpful. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simon Tay, for leading the panel session, which is the very first one of the day, and also to our esteemed speakers as well. And to extend our appreciation to all the speakers and moderator who will present a token of appreciation, and on this case, it will be presented by the IBC board. Would like to invite Mr. George Santosa Tahir to come forward and deliver the token of appreciation. Thank you. So once again, let's appreciate all speakers, moderator on the session that talked about how Indonesia can stay on the winning side, even though we have global trade wars happening at the moment. With many potentials that Indonesia have, and focusing on what can be reformed or boosted to win the global trade wars, and also insights on how to make the partnership with ASEAN as something beneficial to Indonesia. And let's use this moment for a photo session as well. Don't forget to smile, ladies and gentlemen.